extensively throughout the world, giving these lectures, and offers them to people for free. He sustains his work through his work in Pennsylvania, and God has really blessed him and his family. As you know, he's written a number of books. Who of you got the books last night? Excellent. If you didn't get the book, you can go online to his website and order it there. So you're welcome to do that. I want to invite you as bow your heads, and we're going to pray before we start. Father in heaven, thank you so much that we can come again this evening and just learn about our health and how important it is for us to stay healthy and to live a healthful life. We just pray that you would guide us prayers this evening as he brings us a very interesting topic tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to invite Dr. Ramirez up. I'm thankful so much that you have come all the way to bless us this evening with part 3 in the series. And I want to remind each of you that tomorrow at 11 is part 4. So don't forget, part 4 tomorrow at 11.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Robinson. I've been having a great time here in Guam. Today, they took me to see the whales, the dolphins, and we saw even the flying fish. It's the first time I've seen flying fish. I've never seen flying fish before. I thought they used to fly, but they actually fly. You know, they have little wings. And we also saw some turtles, and a little chance there to go a little bit there of going around and modifying the environment and so forth. So I was in Finland before coming here, and one of the things that we did when we went to Finland, there was this frozen lake. So we literally made a hole there. It's quite the work actually, because this block of ice were like this thick, you know. So you have to really work hard to remove it first with a chainsaw with the holes there, and then with a little bar there, we start individually cutting down this saw that you use. So then I went to the sauna, and then this is what I did afterwards. We went there and boom, you know, all the way down in the ice cold water. It actually felt very good. If you are nice and warm, if you're not warm, it doesn't feel very good. And I met somebody there that he actually goes to the lake that is frozen in his winter, and every day he goes there without sun. You know? Then my respect to that person. So today we're going to talk about a fascinating subject, the subject of internal clocks, the subject of circadian rhythms, and the subject of circaseptan rhythms. This is something that is called chronobiology. Learning that human beings have internal clocks. So it's very interesting. If you see around nature, you're going to see that things have cycles. In fact, I have always been fascinated about this, how those cycles, you know, have a certain pattern and so forth. As I mentioned to you, my undergraduate is computer science, and I remember I did a little computer program simulating, you know, the orbits of each of the planets and so forth. They have a certain pattern, definite, within each other. And these patterns are something that we can actually predict. So we know that, for example, Mars, you know, is going to do a full turn at a certain, you know, amount of time. We know that Mars is going to be at this particular spot at this particular time, and that's why they have been able, you know, to send, you know, these probes down there because they can predict these things as there is a definite pattern there. And we also see, especially not in Guam, cycles in nature. Especially if you live like in Pennsylvania where I live, you're going to see that things start changing throughout the day, throughout the year. So you have the winter stations, and then you have the summer stations, and you have the regeneration that takes place in spring. And one of the experts on cycles happen to be females. They are reminded that there is a cycle inside of them every single month. Yes or no? And that cycle is preparing the female for potential conception. So the bed where that little baby is going to be received is prepared. If fertilization does not take place, then that special bed that has been made to receive that baby suddenly starts to be destroyed, and then the cycle repeats over and over. Males also have some cycles, but not as visual as this one. It's interesting that even God had cycles. Notice that it says that when the time arrived that was set by God the Father, God sent His Son. So there was some sort of timing there, that when the right time was there, boom, it happened. And we're learning that DNA inside our cells is that, DNA, this code that is inside of us, there are coding there for times. There is definite chronobiology related things inside that DNA. And we know that food has an impact on our genes. This is what nutrigenomics study. So how certain nutrients go ahead and activate either good things or bad things. If you, as we have been learning the past few nights, if your food is not the correct one, well, you end up activating the wrong types of things. You can activate disease genes and so forth. At the same time, the right choices activate the right type of things inside your DNA. But it's not only what you eat, but when you eat it. That is what we are learning from chronobiology. And every single one of us have internal cycles inside of us. And those internal cycles determine multiple functions throughout the organism. For example, we know that every organ in the body has a clock. Now, let's say that you have 6 clocks in your home, okay? Especially if it's the battery type. What's going to happen sooner or later? The clocks are going to start desynchronizing one to another, yes or no? So what do you need to do? You need to find a clock that you trust, and then you synchronize each one of those clocks so that now all of them work together. In the same way, because there's multiple clocks in the human organism, there are the possibility of desynchronization. In fact, every day your clocks get desynchronized. So what do you need to do? We need synchronization. The main clock in the body is found in your brain, in the hypothalamus, and that is the master clock. So depending on that master clock is how things are synchronized in the body. Now, this is the interesting thing.
There are things that cause further desynchronization in the body. There are things that help to synchronize those clocks inside the body. Therefore, that's why I'm very glad you guys are here tonight, because we are going to be learning about what things we can do to cause that right synchronization in our bodies. So, one of the things that help with the synchronization process happen to be bright light. And that's the reason why many people have a hard time on Mondays, because they desynchronize their clocks in the weekend. During the week, they were waking up at, 6 in the morning, and then you have to go to bed early because you have to wake up early, and you follow a certain pattern throughout the week. But then what happens on Friday night, Saturday, Sunday? Here they are on bed, all the way till 10 in the morning. So you end up desynchronizing those clocks. By the time that Monday comes, you feel horrible, yes or no? Secondary to the desynchronization that you cause. Now, certain nutrients cause synchronization, bright light causes synchronization, and other factors. And now we know that multiple diseases are directly related to desynchronization. Because you not only mess up around with the internal clocks that are in your body, but you also end up affecting the beneficial bacteria that inhabit your digestive tract. So you cause multiple problems in your body when you are desynchronizing yourself. And this very interesting study, it was showing how there are certain times of the day when we are optimized to do certain functions. And you know that very well. There's certain times you are more hungry. There's certain times you are more sleepy. There's certain times your mind is more clear, and so forth, because there is a clock inside of us. And based on that clock, different functions of the body are required. Now, this very interesting study was analyzing shift workers. Shift workers is one of the worst things you can ever do to your body, in which for 1 week, you're working mornings, and then in the next week, you're going to be working afternoons. And then the next week, you're going to be working night shift. And then the next week, you're going to go in the morning. That constant changing is not good for your clocks. And we know that those people that work in shifts are at very elevated risk for obesity and diabetes. In fact, in this published paper, it was very interesting how when they were measuring the function of the pancreas as the shift changed, as soon as the person changed from one shift to another one, their pancreas was having a hard time keeping up with the new schedule. So when the person ate, and they were analyzing how the food was being metabolized, the pancreas was having really hard time adapting to the new time zone. So this cycle of the body is called the circadian rhythm. It comes from the Latin, from the word circa, which means about, and dia, which means day. It's a cycle of about a day that each one of us have. Now, this is just one of the cycles that the body has. The body has multiple cycles. Now, when we talk about cycles, we have to talk about melatonin, one of the most important chemicals in your whole body. Did you know that melatonin is involved in all kinds of processes in your body? From immunity to blood pressure control, to pain control, to fertility, all kinds of things are directly linked to melatonin. In fact, your longevity is linked to melatonin. People that secrete less melatonin are at high risk for early disease and early death. I have a video about melatonin. Here's the good news, bad news. Good news, that video has 2.8 million views. It's a viral video. Bad news is in Spanish. But if you're interested in watching it, you can actually click here and then select the auto translate the video. The Google, will auto translate the video for you, and you can get, most of the important information out of that video. So this melatonin, our modern lifestyle does a really good job at really disturbing this melatonin. Melatonin is secreted as soon as darkness started to come in. Melatonin amount starts to increase dramatically. But if you are exposed to blue light, you're telling your body, hey, it's not night yet. It still is day. Don't secrete my melatonin. And that's the problem of staring at screens like your cell phone and so forth. See, that blue light is telling the body, don't secrete the melatonin yet. Another mistake that we do in our modern society is that we go to bed too late. In fact, most of that melatonin is going to be secreted early in the evening. And if you go to bed at 12, at 1 a.m. and so forth, you're losing most of the melatonin of the night. Therefore, less melatonin, more desynchronization in the clocks in your body. So that's why it's so important to learn to have the habit of going to bed on time. And this very interesting study was showing how night owls, there's some people that say, oh, doctor, I'm a night owl. I function very good, better in the evening than in the morning. But night owls are at high risk for mental health problems later on. Now, in the following study, what they did, they took those night owls and they put them on tents to go camping. Guess what happened? Every single one of those night owls became morning people. Why? Well, think about it. If you're going camping and they take away your cell phones and so forth, you can only do so much, isn't it, in the evening? And what? You need to go to bed. And then when the morning comes, because of the thickness of the tent, you detect light, Therefore, you start creating that synchronization in the body, and then you need to wake up at 6 in the morning, 5:30, as the light is coming up, and then that synchronization takes place, and you can shift those night owls into morning people. This topic is so important that just a few years ago, the Nobel Prize was given to these people that were studying body clocks. Now, we know that severe depression is directly linked to the disruption of these important body clocks. Because see, when you create that desynchronization that we're talking about, that desynchronization is like a domino effect. You start affecting other things and other things and other things. and your mental health cannot work properly like that. And this very fascinating study was documenting how if you are healthy, therefore better synchronization in your body, your amounts of melatonin are nice and high. But if you are diabetic, you tremendously decrease the amount of melatonin that your body secretes at night, secondary to the desynchronization that excess glucose in the blood is causing. And in fact, there's a relationship. The worse the control, if the person already has neuropathy, it's even less the melatonin that your body will be able to secrete. So, doctor, I'm diabetic. What am I going to do? Well, we have many options. One of them is this one. Remember the clinical case I was sharing yesterday? This patient that was diabetic, hypertensive, obese, and was taking multiple medications with intensive lifestyle changes. This patient was able to lose enough weight and start causing the synchronization in his body so that diabetes reverse, hypertension reverse, and obesity reverse. So there is hope. Now, you can attend one of these residential programs. You can go to the SDA clinic. They have a department there in which they do lifestyle changes. Or you can even do this online. You know, there's multiple programs. And I've done a few studies on the subject. In this study, we were showing how that fasting glucose starts to improve in a matter of 18 days as the person starts, eating the right diet, doing their exercise, synchronizing those body clocks. This has tremendous therapeutic effect. In this other study that we did, you find it also there on my ResearchGate, we took all the patients from our residential program that came to our program for 18 days for a whole year. And then we were checking what's happening with their medication after 18 days. What we're documenting in this study is that close to 90% of the patients, we either were able to remove their medications in 18 days or decrease dramatically their meds. So tremendous improvement that happened to their blood pressure that we had to do significant changes in their blood pressure medication. And this other study also, we were showing how both systolic and diastolic blood pressure respond wonderfully as we start taking those blood pressure measurements in this group of patients that are going through this 18-day program. Within days, that blood pressure starts coming down. We need to start making changes to their medication as blood pressure starts coming down. Or this other one, this is a mental health program, yet the poorly controlled diabetics, as they learn about the good behaviors to have a good mental health, their fasting glucose improves very much in just a matter of 8 weeks. Or like this one, I'm in the process of publishing this clinical case. One of our patient had diabetes, hypertension, obesity, depression, and was taking this bag of medications. And after a couple of months of intensive lifestyle changes, we were able to help this patient stop all these medications. And we did the mathematics. How much money this patient was saving? Well, after 2 months of stopping those medications, this patient is saving $53,850 a year of medication he no longer needs to take. Good news or bad news? Good news, isn't it? That's the down payment you need for that new house that you want to buy, isn't it? So as you can see, not only your health improves, your pocket improves as a result of these intensive lifestyle changes. And as we mentioned, that hydrotherapy, as it activates the immunity, this is something that you can use synergetically. As you're changing your diet, as you're doing your exercise, hydrotherapy treatments can help achieve that synchronization that we want to do. Again, all that research is found here. Just Google Francisco Ramirez ResearchGate, and you should be able to get all those studies and many, many more that are there. So we saw how diabetes interrupts melatonin, but what happens at the level of the genes with these patients? This is fascinating. Look at this. See, the genes that are involved in the synchronization of the internal body clocks on somebody that is diabetic, please notice how there is less activation of the synchronization genes. Is that going to be good or bad? It's not good, because that means those people are going to have a little bit of a hard time synchronizing their body clocks compared to somebody that does not have the diabetes but has some obesity. You can see the activation of those body clock genes takes place much better. Now, for those people that want to do, some of these lifestyle changes at home, there's some very nice resources. There's this excellent book, Reversing Diabetes, by Dr. Neil Barnard. We are co-authors in this book, Rethink Food. There is this program called Diabetes Undone. It's an intervention that you can do at home, or many times the SDA clinic runs this program. So contact them and ask them when is the next time. They're going to be running this Diabetes Undone program. And there's also residential programs like the New Start program, in which you can participate for 18 days and receive these interventions in a concentrated form. So there is even another cycle that we are finding in the body. And this cycle is called the circa septum. So it comes from the word circa, about, and septum is the Latin word for 7. So about 7 days is the cycle that is in the body. Notice the description of these cycles. This circa septum, or about weekly rhythms, are one of the major surprises turned up by modern chronobiology. 15 years ago, few scientists would have expected that a 7-day biological cycle would prove to be so widespread and so long established in the living world. Because it's fascinating. See, for example, what happens astronomically speaking every year? The Earth goes what? Around the sun. What happens astronomically speaking every month? The moon goes around the earth. What happens astronomically speaking every 7 days? Somebody knows, please let me know. You're going to get the Nobel Prize probably. See, we are programmed inside of us with this 7-day cycle. In fact, there's been different regimes that tried to change this, such as in the French Revolution. They tried to mess around with the work week, and they tried to shorten it up. In communist Russia, they also tried to do that. It doesn't work. The people get sick, productivity goes down, because you're going against internal program cycles of the body. This is something that is physiology. You need to work with the physiology and not against it. So from the most microscopic organism to the biggest whales in the ocean, every single living thing not only has a circadian rhythm, but has a 7-day cycle inside of them. And it's interesting that in the Bible, it talks about a cycle of 7. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7-day Sabbath of the Lord your God, in it you shall not do any work. And please notice this fascinating fact. It says there that you shouldn't work, your son shouldn't work, your daughter shouldn't work, your male shouldn't work, your female servant shouldn't work, and your what? What says there? Your what? Your cattle. Wait a minute, is this about religion? Have you ever seen cows go to church on Sabbath or something like that? I mean, I saw something like that in India, where there's so many cows that sometimes some cows, go inside and so forth. But cattle don't go to church. So this is not talking about religious principles. This is going beyond that. We're talking about biology and physiology principles, as you can see. At first glance, it might seem that weekly rhythms develop in response to the 7-day week imposed by human culture thousands of years ago. However, this story doesn't hold once you realize that plants, insects, animals, and other than humans have weekly cycles. Biology, therefore not culture, is probably the source of these 7-day cycles. And the thing is that there is something special about this 7th day. Notice what happened. Then God what? Blessed the 7th day and sanctified because he rested from all his work which God had created and made. It's a principle in the Bible. If you want to understand what something means in the Bible, let the Bible explain itself. So if you see, for example, the word bless, well, let the Bible explain what bless means. So, in order to do that, we find in the Bible where the word bless is used. Where was the first blessing of the Bible? Anybody? Who did God give the first blessing of the Bible? To whom? Adam and Eve, said many people. Not necessarily. First blessing of the Bible, God created sea creatures and every living thing that moves and that went on the water. And what happened? God what? God blessed him. And please notice the pattern. When God blesses something, saying what? Be what? Fruitful and multiply. That's the first blessing. Second blessing, to whom did it go? Now you don't want to say, ¿verdad? Okay, second blessing does go to Adam and Eve. So God created man in his own image, the image of God. He created male and female. Then what happened? God blessed them, and then what else is next to it? Be fruitful and multiply. Next blessing of the Bible, where does it go to? It goes to Noah. Then God blessed Noah and his son and said to them, what? Be fruitful and multiply. Can we see a pattern here? See, blessing is implicated in multiplication and so forth. Therefore, if we want to understand blessing and multiplication, we may want to look into the human body, into the cells. Cells are something that are constantly multiplying. Many of the cells in your body, for example, your mouth, your digestive tract, they're constantly multiplying because food comes and scratches the surfaces of your intestines. It needs to be replaced constantly. So those cells are multiplying constantly. And then we have the cellular division. So when the cells multiply, you make a copy from that cell into two cells. Now, That means you need to copy the instruction manual, also known as the DNA in the body. Now, have you ever made a copy of a long text? What's going to happen sooner or later? You're going to make what? You're going to make a mistake. And it's the same thing that happens in the body. When the body is making a copy of the DNA, sometimes it makes mistakes. So, because there is mistakes that are taking place due to the multiplication of the DNA, the body needs reparation in order to fix these mistakes. Now, let's calculate how much reparation we need. Well, let's make the calculation. There's about 24,000 genes on your DNA. And there is 30,000 million pairs of DNA on each of your cells in the body. Now, 30,000 million multiply by 1 trillion cells that you have in your body. What's the result? Your calculator is going to give you an E, error. It's too long the number to calculate. Okay? That is how much reparation we need in our bodies. Plus, we do our part at causing what are called oxygen-free radicals in our body, even causing further damage to our DNA through not sleeping enough, through intemperance, through overeating, and multiple things create oxygen-free radicals which damage even further our DNA. So we can even predict. See, your children, when you have children, they're going to have about 60 mutations each generation. That's how actually we know that we're not millions of years ago and so forth, this thing that they say. It's too many mistakes. If you do the mathematics, DNA would be non-functional as that long. There's even articles in journals, serious journals like Journal Science, Journal Nature, predicting, the longevity of this DNA. So those mutations, as they start increasing, that's why at the beginning, they even marry brother and sister, isn't it? Because there was no damage to the DNA. The reason why you need to marry somebody different is that my mistakes in my DNA, my cousins also have a lot of those mistakes. So if we marry, my mistakes and their mistakes are not corrected because we're not different. But if you marry somebody that is different, the probability that my mistake, that person also has that mistake, is very low. That's the reason why that started to happen. And the more that time went by, the more mutations that were introduced to the DNA, and therefore, the farther away you should be marrying to another person. So, because this division is taking place, lots of mistakes are being made. Therefore, we are in need of lots of reparation in our body. So, the Sabbath is a special day. It's like when your car has a bad noise. If your car starts, what do? You go to the mechanic, and then you arrive to the mechanic. Hey, mechanic, look at how my car is sounding. What does the mechanic says? Turn off the car. Yes or no? Then you turn off the car, and the mechanic can go, and start fixing things that need to be fixed in your car and so forth. So that's why it's a good idea to turn off the car, isn't it? Every Saturday, because that's the day that reparation takes place. Even in the Bible, this is very interesting. See, Jesus was healing on the Sabbath, and the Jews started giving him a hard time. Then the men departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus which had made him whole. Therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things which day? On the Sabbath day. And notice how Jesus responded when they confronted him. But Jesus answered to them and said, this is Saturday when Jesus answering, my Father is working, therefore what? I'm working. So God is working on Saturday, therefore I'm working, said Jesus. What is God doing on Saturday? Repairing what? DNAs of all those people on planet Earth. And it's interesting that the level of activity of multiple animals have been documented to decrease activity on Saturday. One of those animals happened to be the melipona. Melipona is a type of bee that doesn't sting. When their activity level is measured, on the Saturday, the level of activity actually decreases. Another one is this very interesting DVD. This happened very close to where I used to live in California. This is a medical doctor, that bought a big piece of property. And he started analyzing the beavers that live in his property. And you can just, find this DVD online and watch it. He is documenting how the activity of the beavers decreases dramatically every Saturday. The rest of the week, they're like super busy and so forth. But on Saturday, the level of activity decreasing. They're turning off their car, because they know that that's when reparation happens. Now, how come other, animals and so forth? I don't know. Maybe we haven't even observed them well. This is something that we are learning as we are going. And we know, for example, that human beings have definite cycles of multiple things. The chemistry in our blood, our heartbeat, our hormones, our temperatures, you can definitely trace those cycles very clearly. In fact, this is a fascinating study. In this study, what they were doing, they were taking blood samples of people in the community, and they were measuring the level of stress hormone in the body. And then they went ahead and they traced that stress hormone, and you can clearly see that there is a pattern there on the stress hormone every single week. Now, in the text of this paper, you can see what they documented. Notice what it says. It appears that there is a strong weekly rhythm in day-to-day mood. This pattern shows a peak around Friday night. Anybody knows what happens on Friday night? The Sabbath starts, if you study the Bible, and Saturday and a throat around Monday or Tuesday. In other words, Saturday is the day of the week that there is less stress. See, the body is getting prepared so you can turn off the car, isn't it? You are programmed to have this. So it's the same story as the melatonin. Remember what we said. So melatonin is going to be secreted every night, early in the night. But you choose if you want the melatonin or not. You can stay up late, but you're going to miss the blessing of the melatonin. It's an optional blessing. In the same way, every Saturday, the stress starts to decrease on every single one of us, preparing us to rest. But you choose if you want to rest or not, if you're going to receive that blessing or not. And there is in this paper, as they were documenting, a relationship between pleasure and stress. Question, when you're like super stressed, can you actually, experience pleasure very well? Yes or no? No, isn't it? So, low levels of stress hormone, more pleasure. I mean, it's very interesting. Even the honeymoon of Adam and Eve was clocked like this. When was the honeymoon of Adam and Eve? Anybody knows? Friday night, isn't it? Less, even that, was timed perfectly. And this very interesting study, they were documenting that in Israel, if you've ever been to Israel, the official calendar there, nobody works on Saturday. It's just the way that things are work there in Israel. And it's very clear that the numbers of death is actually very small in Israel on the Sabbath, on Saturday. Why? Because there's less stress. There's a relationship there with heart disease. There's more likely to be a heart attack Mondays, Tuesdays. Somebody works in the ER, they know this very well, because that's when the level of stress starts increasing and so forth. And this other paper, very interesting, we hypothesize that the 7-day time structure of human beings is of what type? Endogenous. It's programmed inside of you, this cycle of resting on the 7th day, on Saturday. Okay? So this is a principle of physiology. It doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or atheist or Catholic. You are programmed to rest on Saturday. That's the way that we are coded in our DNA. We also hypothesize they are representative, at least in part, of the biological requirement for rest and repair 1 day each 7 days. Just as the circadian time structure is representative in part of the biological need for rest and repair each 24 hours. So as we're programmed on our circadian rhythm to rest every night, we are programmed to rest 1 day every 7 days. And it's interesting, there's this historian, a Jewish historian. You can, find these books online. And in the book, Against Appian, Flavius Josephus is the name of this Jewish historian. He documents the following fact. The masses have long since shown a keen desire to adopt our religious observances. And there is not one city, Greek or barbarian, nor a single nation to which our custom from abstaining from work on the 7th day has not spread. Because it's the natural thing to do. It's what we are programmed to do, to rest on the Saturday. So even the people that were not Jews, that's what they were doing because it's the natural thing to do. And the natural thing to do is to sleep at night. The natural thing to do is for you to rest on that Saturday. So what we have learned today is that there are multiple biological cycles in our body, including the circadian, which is a cycle of 24 hours, including the circamonthly of 30 days, including the circaannual of 1 year, and including the circaseptum, which is of 7 days. So, my desire to you is that you may receive that blessing this Saturday as you turn off your car and receive the special blessing that God has for you, which means reparation of that DNA. Thank you very much. Let me see. Dr. Robinson will moderate. Let me see what's going to happen.
We want to ask you some questions, Doc, this evening.
Yes.
Is there anyone who would like to ask a
Well,
question?
he said he had a question.
All right.
I'd like to ask you, sir, because you mentioned about DNA,
Yes.
which is deoxyribonucleic acid.
Yes.
Has that something to do with resting?
Yes. So
Thank you.
think of that DNA as a bunch of apps. Okay, that's what DNA is, a bunch of computer programs. You know, my undergraduate is computer science, that's the way I think. So there's many computer programs there. There's programs there to repair the body. There's program there to create the body. When you were inside your mother's womb, it was being accessed that DNA to see how you're gonna make the bones, how you're gonna make the hands. All these things are coded there. And in that DNA, there's also instructions for the maintenance of the body. So when you're sleeping at night, there's certain programs, there's certain apps that are going to activate at night. They're going to help, with the reparation process and so forth. And it's coded there in that DNA, that circadian and that circa septum, that 7-day cycle on each one of us.
Thank you so much. Anyone else have a question for him?
Is there any saving grace for a person like myself that has a different schedule every day?
That's right. Yeah. So you're creating lots of desynchronization in your body. I actually have a few studies that I done. You find them there on my ResearchGate, documenting how regularity is so important. Specifically, I study mental health. So when somebody is irregular, every day things are different. Every day, you have a different meal plan. Every day you go to bed at different time and so forth. That disorder is not good for your health. So you're more likely, to end up with metabolic problems and all kinds of issues. So yeah, we need to start working, at putting order on the disorder. So we should have regular meal times. We should go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, the whole week. Some people respect that in the week, but then disrespect that in the weekend. You need to continue, with a similar program like that.
Would that include graveyard shifts? Would that include graveyard shifts?
Absolutely. If you're in a graveyard shift, the best thing you can do is to ask for change, in the morning. So yes, that is the issue. One point also, when I was in medical school, one of the things I would do, I never went to bed later than 10 p.m. And I think the strategy worked out very good. I graduated first place in my class. So I think it worked very well to do that.
Another question here, Doc.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Ramirez. I was just curious. You were talking about using blue light, in the evening.
That's right.
So I have just a technical question. If you have your device on night shift mode,
That's right.
which cuts down on the blue light, does that make a difference?
Yes,
Is there
it does
actually
make
study?
it does make a huge difference. In fact, every single one of you should have that. Okay? Most of the modern operating systems, from Windows 10 to the latest version of Apple, to the latest version of your iPhone, to the latest version of Android, because this is where science is moving, have a function to block the blue light at sunset. Activate it, okay? And even if you in your computer, that I like a very nice program I have there. It's called FLUX, F-L-U-X. And that it will actually time things so that when sunset is happening, it'll block your blue light. If you have to use the device at night, ideally you shouldn't be using these devices, but yet it does make a difference.
Doctor, I like to ask you because deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA,
Yes?
it means that when you rest, it increases?
Okay. Deoxyribonucleic acid is the code in which that computer program was coded. So it won't increase, you still have the same program, but the program for reparation starts. That's what happens. So it activates when that happens. Think about that DNA like a recipe in a cookbook. So what is a recipe? A recipe is the step-by-step procedure of how to accomplish something. It says there, put 5 cups of flour and this amount of oil and this amount of fruit and mix this and put it in the oven. After 30 minutes, take it out. And if you follow that step-by-step procedure, you're going to arrive at something. In the same way, in the DNA, there's a bunch of recipes there that when the body follows them, there's something that comes as a result of that.
You were mentioning about the 7-day cycle, quoting scripture.
That's right.
And saying not necessarily it's a Christian thing or perhaps not even Jewish, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
There is a country in the world that everything shuts down on Saturday.
That's right.
No schools, no government, shut down on Saturday. Do you know what their religion is?
Yeah, Judaism.
Hindu.
Okay.
And the country is Nepal.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Did you know that China also used to rest on Saturday? And there's a fascinating documentary. If you're interested in the subject, just look it up on YouTube. It's called The Seventh Day. It's a full documentary, a 7-part documentary in which historians and scientists are interviewed, documenting throughout history how multiple groups, have kept this 7-day and so forth, because again, it's something natural in us. So yeah, Nepal, and we'll add Israel there also. Yeah.
Anyone else have a
my
question?
people. I'm genetically Jew. Okay.
Well, I think
Very
we've got all the questions answered.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Doc. We really appreciate your talk this evening. We want to invite you all to come tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Same place. We'll have another lecture. And what is your topic tomorrow, Doc? Is there a new pandemic on the horizon? I want to hear about that. What about you? Yes. Let's bow our heads together and we'll close tonight. Father in heaven, thank you so much that you have put a clock in our body to give us rhythm and timing, to give us times for rest and times for activity. And we're thankful that you have designed us in such a wonderful way. We pray that you would be with us as we go home tonight. Keep us safe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Have a good evening and drive safely.